Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Future Leaders Sessions. I think, fingers crossed, if everything has worked out, we should be live streaming on LinkedIn right now. I'm super excited about the conversation that we're going to be having today, because we're going to be talking about leading the business around you. And I have some amazing guests who have been personally invited onto this session as panelists to share their words of wisdom, their insights, their learnings. So consider this some free coaching from people who are doing the job right now and who can really speak from experience. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes, or not even a couple of minutes, just a few more seconds to allow some more people to join, as I know that we've got some people in the waiting room on Zoom, and we've got some people just joining on LinkedIn right now. But I think we are live on LinkedIn. So I'm going to look for some signs of life in a second, and I'll tell you how I'm going to see that. But as I said, today's session is all going to be around leading the business around you. And have a look at the screen if you can already. We've got some amazing guests with years and years of experience to talk through. And here we go. Let's just jump right in, guys. So just to start, this is a Zoom recording. So we have people sitting in the Zoom room. So welcome if you're sitting inside of Zoom. And also, as I've said a couple of times, we should be having some people watching us on LinkedIn Live right now. Now, the thing about LinkedIn Live is that we can't actually see who's live watching us. So we are going to be using a special platform called Slido. That's going to be our center of truth for everybody to interact together. And in just a second, I'm going to give you access to a QR code so you can open up Slido. So you're going to be able to interact with us no matter if you're in LinkedIn or if you're in Zoom following this conversation. So the key thing about Slido is that you're going to have the opportunity to add your questions. We're going to start with some preset questions to get the conversation going, but this is interactive. So we want you to be asking your questions in Slido. When you open up Slido, you're going to see that there's already a list of questions there. If you like some of those questions and you want them to be answered, upvote them by giving them a thumbs up. If there's a burning question that's not there that you want to add it on there, because if it's important for you, the chances are it's probably important for somebody else as well. So please add your questions, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as possible during this discussions. If you have technical issues, you can use the Zoom chat. We have our amazing Jess there supporting us, and she will be helping you with Zoom. If you have a LinkedIn technical issue, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you, but we're hoping that it's going to work okay today. This is being recorded and it will be available on Elemed's website. So stay tuned for a follow-up email, sharing the link to view the recording. And finally, we will stick to time, because I know that especially if you're in Austria like Elizabeth, it's Krempels tonight, and so there's a lot of drinking and partying to be doing as you escape the demons that are chasing you around. So I've heard all about this festival, guys. So if anyone else is celebrating that tonight, I'm interested to know. So let's move on. Here is the QR code. So grab your phone, scan that QR code, and open it up, and it should take you to a Slido where you should be able to see two sections. You should be able to see, well, you can't really see my screen, but you should be able to see some pre-registered questions and a section called Q&A, where we're going to launch some live polls to get you all interacted and using the tool. So the other thing is, if you're in the Zoom chat, you can't message in chat. We're not monitoring the Zoom chat. So please use Slido as your space to ask all your questions that you want us to read out in front of our guests. So let's move on, because I've been doing a lot of the talking now and I'm getting a bit bored of hearing my own voice. So before we do that, I'd love to know where you are joining from. So we're about to launch a poll on Slido that you should see, and it's coming up and it says, where are you joining from? So enter. I'm joining from a very grey London. So enter that. Let us know where you're joining from. Hit hit send and it will pop up on the screen. So we've got people from New Jersey in the US. Grey London is me. I'm hoping we've got more than 2 people in the chat today. Okay, we've got Tuttlingen, we've got Stockholm, we've got London, we've got Innsbruck. We've got people from all over the world. Where else are you joining from? Let us know. London is a big one. Okay, excellent. So now you get the feel for how to use Slido. So guys, let's jump in. I want to welcome our amazing panelists to the show. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go straight into a brief introduction. So I'd love to know who you are and what you do. So I'm going to start with Elizabeth. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure thing. Hi everyone. And I'm very, very honored to be invited today and to be among this panel. I'm very excited to learn more myself. So my name is Elizabeth Fuller and I work for a wonderful company called Medel, the hearing implant company. And our mission is to make people hear and to experience the joy of sound. So it's a very great, lofty goal. I am a regulatory nerd, so to speak, and I have been on a regulatory journey for 23 years now, and I still enjoy every day of it. I look after the function, the corporate regulatory function here in Medel at the corporate headquarters, and have a team of about 68 reporting into my function. And of course, we have partners in the 134 markets that we support from here, looking after pre-market submissions and changes, vigilance, complaints, labeling, the whole caboodle of regulatory. So looking forward to hearing more.
Thanks so much. Monica, over to you.
Great, thank you. Very glad to be here today and excited to talk about this topic. So thanks for the invitation, and I'm excited to learn and to listen. So I am Senior Director of Global Regulatory Affairs for our endoscopy unit at Medtronic. Medtronic is the world's largest medical device maker, and our mission is to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. So a little bit like Elizabeth, I am a regulatory nerd. So I have been in the business, oh gosh, I'm not going to say how long, but always learning and always developing. And then leadership is my passion. So I'm very excited to be here today to talk to leaders, future leaders, aspiring leaders. And yeah, I'm based in the United States, so I'm the only one who's bright and perky for the morning, and everybody else is getting ready to go home. So that's lucky for you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Monica. Let's go over to Karim now.
Hi, it's also a pleasure from my side to be here today. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Karim Jamshidi. I'm the Vice President for Patient Health and Regulatory Compliance at Karl Storz. Karl Storz is also in the endoscopic business. So I'm basically responsible for medical scientific affairs, regulatory affairs, and post-market management. I'm also the person responsible for regulatory compliance for Karl Storz. And I have a team of around about 180 team members all over the world, and with some dotted functions as well. And yeah, I think also, as Monica said, for me, leadership is a passion. So although I'm basically come more from the regulatory side, leadership is, I think, what cares and where we learn in the moment also as leaders the most.
Thank you very much, Karim. And finally, over to you, Stefan.
Thank you, Eleanor, and hi, everyone. My name is Stefan Fischer. I'm the Senior Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for the Paul Hartmann Group. This is a German company with approximately 2.5 billion sales. My team size is roughly 110 colleagues in about 23 countries of the world. And Paul Hartmann, for those who don't know, develops a lot of medical devices, but also procedure packs and cosmetics and biocides and pharma. So we do a lot of things. And I'm trying to keep the regulatory up to this challenge. As my colleagues also said here, I'm in charge also of complaint and vigilance and PMS, and also a bit of the clinical responsibility. And I'm in the industry now for more than 30 years. with a background of engineering and finance and business administration. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion and lots of questions from your end.
Brilliant. And so I'm pleased to say that we are live streaming on LinkedIn. I'm sorry, LinkedIn people, if we were a little bit slow to get live, but I've just had a confirmation that we are indeed live. So I'm super excited to welcome you to this session. The recording will be made available on the Elemed website for those who need it if you just missed the intros. But rest assured, we've got some amazing guests here today, and you haven't missed the main bulk of the conversation. I'm going to take a second to just quickly share my screen one more time for those of you that are joining on LinkedIn. Please scan this QR code. This QR code is the space where we are logging questions, and we are going to be upvoting questions so that when we go to the live Q&A, we can address the most popular questions first. So have a look at the questions that are already in the Slido. Upvote the ones you like and that you want answered. But if you've got additional questions that are not written there, please add it, because it's most likely going to be valuable for other people listening in as well. So please go ahead and do that and scan this QR code in order to open up Slido so you can interact with us there. Thank you, everybody. So welcome once again to our guests, and let's jump in. So today is all about talking about the business around you. This is the third episode of our Future Leaders series. The other episodes have been more focused on building teams and looking inwards. This one is more about looking outwards and partnering. So my first question that I'd love you all to answer actually is, can you please give me one piece of advice that leaders need to be aware of when it comes to working with the wider business? So let's do a little round robin. I'm going to start with Monica.
Absolutely. My piece of advice is always remember that we're all on the same team, pulling toward the same goal. So there shouldn't be any divisions within the business. We should all be working toward that larger goal.
Thank you. Yeah, that's cool, because there's enough competition on the outside, right? So we're all in this together. Brilliant. Okay, and Stefan, what would you say?
Yeah, very similar to what Monica said. I think I'm always trying to put myself in the shoes of the other person, of the colleague. Not everyone is a regulatory expert, so it requires some understanding on both ends to work together.
Thank you. So it's about understanding who you're dealing with, and I know we're going to go more into this later on, because that is really important to understand who your partner is and what their needs are as well. So that ability to empathize or see from the other perspective is really important. Elizabeth, what about you?
I've got like a 4-step idea that you go in, because we go into so many different things in regulatory. You have to always go in fresh. You have to go in fresh, and you have to go in prepared, open, and be clear. That's the key thing. You always have to be prepared. You have to be open to other opinions and to decide whether you're right in the way you're interpreting something. And you need to be crystal clear, but always to go in fresh. Leave all the past meetings behind and come in fresh.
And with a smile, right?
Always
with a smile and a bit of humor. Thank you, Elizabeth. And Karim, what's your piece of advice for our audience?
I cannot really add something. I think most of this is already said. I think also goals are very important. Look into the future. This is what is in your power. I think what is frustrating sometimes is the past, but we cannot change the past. And don't forget to enjoy the present. So this is my advice.
Thank you. So let's talk about, so everybody's joining this from a leadership perspective in regulatory and quality. So let's talk about business partners, and let's talk about, to Stefan's point, the idea of being able to understand their perspective. So the question that I have is really about, first of all, who are the business partners of regulatory affairs? What do they want, and what are their pain points? So I'm going to throw that first to Elizabeth.
I like that. What do they want? Well, the first thing that's good to notice there is the word partner. You know, we're not enemies, we're not adversaries. We are actually, like Monica said, working on a common end goal, which is to bring these wonderful devices that we have to patients and make sure that they're safe and effective. So the partners were all common, which doesn't always feel like it sometimes. So who are they? From my position, I think I can see the regulatory working very closely with R&D, so the design and development team. They've got this wonderful product. They think it's amazing. They don't think there's any criticism should be leveled at their device. That's going to have a review process with no questions, and how dare anybody think any differently. So their pain points is crafting and spending a lot of love on a device that has to undergo a lot of criticism and critical reviews across the world, which is not always great. Then we have marketing is another partner who we have pain points there, because the regulatory language of an intended purpose perhaps is not very sexy, not very marketing speak. So they will push back, obviously, on saying, why do you want to say it like that? That doesn't sound good. That's not how we can sell things. QA, we work very closely with the QA team, the quality management system team. We also have product management who want to sell and get the approval last week, and they want it for everywhere. That's not very realistic. So we have to kind of get to an understanding of how do we get there. We have the areas who don't necessarily understand why we would want to change our supplier, or why we would want to make that change and get that approval needed. We have things happening on the ground that we need to communicate very clearly to in the areas. Could be a language issue. There's a lot of pain points from understanding and communication point of view sometimes in the area to the manufacturers. And then we have our favorite people who externally are the authorities, whether it's from a post-market surveillance reporting part of view, or actually getting the approvals. So our notified bodies, the FDA, Health Canada, all of them. So they're our partners, because we're all invested in bringing good devices to the market and bringing them to patients. So we have to work as partners, equal partners.
Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. Monica, what would you add to that?
Yeah, like Elizabeth outlined, really, I consider every function in the business to be our partners. I mean, we partner with everybody. That's the reason I got into regulatory, because I love seeing a device being developed from start to finish throughout the life cycle. So what our partners want is to meet the business priorities, for us to give them fast approvals and to meet short deadlines, and all of the above and impossible miracles. So what I focus on is a lot of business partners. Most of our business partners don't understand how regulatory works, and they consider us, I don't know if you guys use this in Europe, but in the US, we're often seen as the Department of No. And so what we're always trying to do is help align with those various partners and the various functions to understand their priorities, and also educate them on regulatory, so that they can understand where our own pain points are, right? And once you understand where another person is coming from, the conversation becomes much, much more open. So it's very much a mutually sharing relationship that I look for in all of my cross-functional partners. I want to understand what they need, and I want them to understand what we need. And that always makes for a really sturdy, well-managed relationship.
Yeah, and always keeping that end goal in mind of like we're all kind of shooting to achieve this common end goal, and in order for us to get there, this is what I need from you, and this is what you can expect from me. So it's that clarity of expectations as well. But I think what I see often, especially with smaller businesses, are sometimes the regulatory being a little bit siloed and not necessarily really understanding what they're or being able to communicate clearly in the language of the business, because regulatory has loads of acronyms, but so does business, right? And so it's really important to be able to use the language of the people that you're talking to in order to connect with them. So Karim, what would you say are sort of like the jargon and the keywords related to doing business?
I think you should be an enabler, nor an policeman. So also I think I implicit use very often the term partner, right? So I think we should talk about the goals. So yeah, I see us as an enabler So we are in the medical device industry. All of us are in the medical device industry, and without us, we cannot bring anything into the market, but also without R&D, we cannot bring the products into the market. So this is somehow a partnership, and I think it's also very common. Or also when you strategize some goals, it's more attractive to strategize innovation goals or whatever are on the corporate strategy defined. So for me, regulatory compliance or patient health is more a core value. And I think if you go on this kind of partner level, everyone has the interest to be compliant, to have also the patient health in focus. So yeah, and we are also cannot do this alone. So also I think those of you who are responsible for the person responsible for regulatory compliance or similar, this is now assigned to dedicated persons or to one dedicated person, but we need also on the other side, some kind of trust that people deliver us, have the same interest. So I don't think we always can convince people and they will always, let's say, want to move to the regulatory department after a meeting, but I think it's very important to have the understanding that regulatory is not an obstacle, it's the solution in the medical device industry. If you do not like regulations, maybe you have to sell something else, but in the medical device industry, it's somehow belongs to the corporate core values.
Thanks, Karim. Monica, what would you add to that in terms of like specific words that might not be necessarily linked to regulatory, but are really important to the business?
Yeah, so every company has them, large or small, right? We all have our own language that we use. And so, for example, right, you always want to know what the business partners speak. So we all know KPIs, key performance indicators, ROI. And so at Medtronic, for example, we use patient-centric a ton. And we also use things like partnering with. We don't just cooperate or work with, right? We partner with. And so if you understand how your business leaders speak, you are able to translate that regulatory, very tech-heavy information into words that they understand. And you can also make a story out of it. So I think it's incumbent on everybody in regulatory to be both a diplomat and a translator, because everybody else in the business is worried about their business, right? They're not worried about regulatory. They want us to come through for them. So I always tell my team, make it so the business understands how we fit in and how we bring value. And part of that is understanding how they talk to each other. So for instance, one of our business leaders loves basketball. So I use sports analogies every time I talk to him, right? Because he can get it. He understands. If I relate something with FDA to, trying to achieve something on the court, then he'll be like, I get it. So always look for those opportunities to really humanize what we do and make it understandable, because we live in a complex world, and we need to help others bring them along.
I really like the idea of translator and diplomat at the same time. Very eloquently put. Stefan, do you have any recommendations on? So Monica's point was every company has its own language, right? And so how can somebody figure out what that language is? Let's say that they're new to a company, they've just joined, they're regulatory, they're up and coming, they want to build this partnership. But how can they go about understanding what language to actually use in order to push their agenda and build that connection?
I honestly believe it's very simple, especially for the newbies on the board and for the future leaders, because just go out and meet as many people and visit as many customers and as many congresses as possible. That's always what I encourage my team to do. Call the sales rep, go on a tour with him for 1-2 days, call the clinical expert and meet her in a setting, in an OR room or whatever, And that's how you pick up those language and those words. And then you can always relate back and okay, I know how those departments possibly tick, and I can relate to them in their language and their KPIs or what have you.
So let's expand on that point then. So I'm gonna make this real, right? So I've just joined a company, and I want to build that connection, and I want to go with a sales rep out to meet some customers. How am I going to convince that sales rep of like why I want to do this? What shall I actually say to actually be able to get that meeting and to actually go out and do that?
I would say you need a kind of a trigger, right? So you can, for example, look into the complaints history. You can look at sales statistics, what have you, and then find this kind of supporting pain point that you can give him or her. In my case, I would go through the complaint statistics really and say, look, we have an issue there. Can I help you somehow? I need to understand the product. I need to understand how they use the product. So can I share a meeting with the customer? Or maybe it's also a more positive thing. They go out for a new tender, or they want to sell the new product. Or I think there are many opportunities really to take care of.
Elizabeth, I see you nodding your head. Do you have something to add to that?
No, definitely. It's a great idea. I think what we haven't said to date yet, though, is that regulatory is ostensibly a strategic function. The business cannot do without. I think, Karen, you were pointing to it. You can't do without regulatory, but I've always seen it as a strategic function because we have the perfect bird's eye view of the business from the start of the idea in terms of development all the way to the end where it's being nearly retired and we've gone through the post-market surveillance. We see everything and we see all departments. We've got a really great advantage. But anybody coming into regulatory, you really have to take that opportunity and grow your job. And like I said, be prepared, which means be knowledgeable, dig into things that you don't know and find out, you know? So it's not, we're not in jail. We're actually at work and we should enjoy ourselves because that's where we spend most of our time. So, you know, it's up to you as well to empower yourself with knowledge, your context, your network. Otherwise, you're not going to be effective generally, whether you're leading a team, but you are a leader in regulatory as a regulatory professional. So I think that's key.
So let's talk about the mysterious black box, which is the C-suite and leadership team, because I know that most of you are very close to that C-suite leadership team. So can you share some insights on how does the C-suite evaluate strategic initiatives, and what do we have to make sure we're doing if we're making a proposal for a new initiative to ensure that we get their buy-in? I'm gonna throw that question to Karim.
So I think first, as I already, or what I mentioned, it's hard sometimes to strategize the regulatory work and put everything in a strategy. So there are business goals, and for me, basically the strategy is something like digitalization and market access. This you can strategize. But for me, the regulatory work, the business, and also where we plan, let's say, re-registrations or new registrations, or when there are maybe things like recalls coming in, somehow we ensure our license to operate. And I don't know how you strategize. So I think it's hard to put a business goal. We want to have our license to operate, for example. So this is very hard to put in a, let's say, 5-year strategy. You cannot also phrase something like in 5 years, we want to have our license to operate, because you operate in a day-to-day business, right? So it's always a kind of continuous improvement. And I think we are, as already mentioned, what I think makes regulatory business so hard is the translation, and especially to the C-suite, it's hard to say. So it's somehow a must do because we want to have our license to operate, but how to measure the added value, this is, I think, the skill set. And yeah, KPIs are one solution, but also talking more about the business. So when we, for example, talk about faster market access, more reliable market access, that we are not, let's say, are very reactive, only reacting on request, predicting additional information, what is coming, and if you can put this measurable. So I think, for example, at our side, we reduce the, let's say, time, or this is what we measure, how much are the delays from one market to the others, how we can enter the market. And in the moment, we have a positive trend for, let's say, getting the market access. So this is something I think what the C-suite or what the business is talking to. So, and if it's not in your core values, I think it's so important to bring patient health and regulatory compliance somehow in the corporate core values, because this is something each job description of each R&D person, of each salesperson, there must be somehow this fundamental foundational elements. Without this, I think it doesn't make sense to operate on strategies.
So let's say we're trying to get buy-in on a strategic initiative from upper management. And I'm interested to hear from all of you on this, right? What have you found works when trying to get that corporate buy-in versus like what really doesn't work? Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was trying to actually figure out where to get the hands up, so I was going to answer you. I think for me, you have to be very careful what you're going to the C-suite with, right? Generally, and how many times you're wanting to have that interaction, because I always feel like you should be careful about what you're able to go with. Are you prepared enough to discuss something and be able to triage it in terms of like, this is what we have to do, this is what we can choose to do additional, and this is what we can think about later. Like, you really have to have a message that it's important enough to discuss with them, because you don't want to cry wolf either. You really want to go and have a discussion when it's important to the business. You need to understand that this is going to have an impact on the business. You've done your research, and that this is a proposal on how we can navigate the gray, right? Because regulatory navigates the gray of the black and white. We go through and we find the way through. And this is the super quick and dirty route that'll get us through. This is the super deluxe route that I'm saying we shouldn't go because it's too expensive and it's too onerous. But this is where we should go because we have to go. So I think really it is preparation, and it is making sure that you are going when you have it fully felt out, as much as you can, of course. But there is a threat, there is a regulatory threat to the business. You alert them of it, and you put forward a proposal on how we can get to the other side through this.
Yeah, I really like the idea of providing options as well, and a recommendation. Monica, what about you?
Yeah, whenever I go to the C-suite or executives, I always think of the acronym BLUF, which is bottom line up front. Tell them what's going on, why it needs to happen, and how you're going to do it. Just be brief, short, sweet, and to the point. They don't have time. They don't want to share the mind space. They have 100 other things going on. So I am, to Elizabeth's point, always prepared, always concise, and always positive. Whatever the issue is, we will work through it and we will be successful.
So what can you make an example for us? So I really like this idea of BLUF. So can you give me, like pretend I'm the C-suite.
Sure.
How would you convey that message? What would good sound like?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to do this off the cuff, and I normally prepare for weeks, but let me give it a try. So if I'm going to you and we're having a regulatory issue, and I'm telling you that the submission is going to be delayed by 2 weeks because of testing issues. So I say to you, Elena, we're going to have a submission delay of 2 weeks. The bottom line is that we will not lose time on the submission timeline, because my team is going to put in the extra hours to ensure that we meet the time that we want FDA to have to review this file. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to work in parallel with R&D while they are completing this testing. And we're also going to be communicating with our reviewer at FDA to let them know that this is coming and to have them prepared so that if they have any questions to start with, we'll be ready for them.
Cool. Very nice. 5 out of 5, I would say. So it's really I mean, just listening to that, right, it's like you give the key bits of information and then you provide, like, you talk through like, this is what I'm doing about it. So actually it's that reassurance and that kind of certainty of, I'm handling this for you, this is more of an FYI. Really cool. Stefan, what about you? Have you got anything to add to this idea?
Yeah, maybe an example, because I was in the board this morning with a new strategy, and just more from a practical point of view, there is the CEO sitting there, the 3 board members sitting. It's this big room with a long brown table, and it's all the paintings on the wall. What I would recommend is send them any information up front if you can. So I did this last week Friday, so they have the weekend to go through if they have the time. And the second advice I would give is also the board members, they want to be taken serious. And if you talk to the CFO, you can estimate what the questions would be, right? What is the cost? How long does it take? All these kind of things. And be prepared for those questions and say, yes, I hear you. It is a regulatory requirement, but this is how I would maneuver with it in this gray zone. I like what Elizabeth said about this. And here's my proposal. So get more into a dialogue instead of asking for permission. That would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely, because you are the experts in the space that you represent. And Karim, what about you? Anything? What have you seen in particular? What have you seen not work well? If you have anything to share on that, so some don'ts.
Complaining.
Okay.
So just go to the C-suite for complaining about something. I think what Monica was already an excellent example. So it's when testing fails, it's not sometimes about a single individual why it fails. Maybe they didn't have the right environment. Maybe the labs were somehow taking another customer priority. So I think it's very important here, not complaining about the topics, because you are the expert, or our teams are the experts. So we cannot just expect that we come with a problem that they will guide us for a solution. So basically it's very important, I think, without a proposal, this won't work.
So be prepared, be positive, bluff, and provide information in advance, and take them seriously. So loads of really good insights, guys. Thank you so much for that. So to all of our listeners, I hope you're still with us. I can see we've still got people in the Zoom, and I'm assured that we've got a lot of people listening right now on LinkedIn. So welcome, and we hope you're enjoying the conversation. We're going to go for another sort of 7 minutes with a couple of questions that I've prepared, and then we are going to be dipping in for some live Q&A in our Slido. So I'm going to take a second to quickly share my screen for those of you that might have joined and missed the beginning. Please scan this QR code and it will open up our Slido. Our Slido is the place where we will be answering questions. So you will be able to see in there some pre-registered questions and some questions that people have been adding during this session. If you like the look of some of those questions, give them a thumbs up. We will be answering the most popular questions first. So if there's one that's burning, give it a thumbs up. Ask your friend to give it a thumbs up. If your mum's in the room with you, ask her to give it a thumbs up so we can get that question answered. But if you've got some other questions as well that aren't on here, please type them in, because they're going to be relevant for other people, I assure you. And we're going to try and get through as many of these questions as we can in the remaining 45 minutes. So let's go to a question about influencing that I want to ask about, because I'm seeing with a lot of the more senior roles that I'm recruiting, influencing is becoming more and more of a kind of required soft skill, especially in bigger companies, especially in matrix environments, especially in roles in medium-sized businesses that have high exposure to senior leadership teams and to the C-suite executives. So I want to talk a little bit about influencing. So my question is, how do you go about adapting your communication style to resonate with individuals with different backgrounds and different perspectives? And also here, I'm quite interested if you have any insights on personality types, and if there's any, I mean, we shouldn't generalize, but if there's any synergies that you can see with, you know, certain departments falling into certain buckets, and so therefore communicating with them in this way typically works quite well. So I'm going to throw this first question across to Elizabeth.
It's a great question, because what we have to do is to understand the message and communicate the message and have it understood and have it then implemented. And usually we are going and annoying people that didn't plan to look at this that day or that week or that month. The key thing is to differentiate between the reaction people have, if it's a bad reaction, whether they're reacting badly to the message, which sometimes sucks. We really do sometimes have a sucky message that something's not going to be approved on time, or it didn't work out, or whatever. So is it the message that they're upset at, or is it the way I communicate that message, or I approach them on that request, or, you know, what is it? And the key thing, I think, for regulatory professionals is always to understand that you have a network of people that need to support you in the business, and you have to develop relationships across the board to have an effective job, to be effective at your job. And some people you just won't please. You're not, and I know we discussed this in the prep meeting, but you're not pizza. You can't please everybody. And sometimes there's just going to be somebody that you just don't get on with. You can turn and try and work out how to approach different people and have like a method of how to ask them. Is it early in the morning? Is it face-to-face meeting? Is it a very simple email? You know, you can get all that. And sometimes there will be just somebody who you just don't get on with, and it doesn't work. But sometimes within your team, there could be somebody who has an in with that person. And then you need to kind of say, okay, well, if it's not me, maybe it's somebody on my team. So you can be strategic sometimes if you really hit a blank wall with people. But usually, if you try and meet them where they are, you try and understand why they're upset or why they're saying no, you can usually find out how to work on something still. I think if you really empathize and you sympathize and you ask with a smile, sometimes with chocolate, you can get there, right?
Chocolate, wine also works, depending. Lunch. Karim, do you have anything to add to this? Any recommendations?
Chocolate works always. But I think, yeah, we talked already about the most points. So I think what you need to accept is there are concurring goals. So the opposite person or the other individuals maybe have different goals. They have different targets which are not 100% aligned with your goals. But this doesn't make them, the reaction they get maybe from a message, or in the worst case, a recall message is something, oh, my business targets are destroyed or something. So I think you always have to change perspective and keep in mind. So I like really the basketball example from Monica in the beginning. So we talk to humans, right? It could also be that there are, let's say, some private topics why people has a bad reaction, or maybe also a good reaction, or maybe sometimes maybe you expect a bad reaction and you get a good reaction. So I think we cannot really predict it, but you have to deal with it, and you have to look really that we are working with human people. And I think it's always, in the end, there should be always a smile after the meeting. So, and don't get frustrated, because mostly we bring the bad messages, but this is, I think, also something where you have to live with. So consider the personal context, and also sometimes consider in which environment a person works. So if they met with let's say in the US, in the sales side, for example, from us, when they meet there on the coffee machine, the salesperson, they have a different mindset maybe than someone is working day to day with product management or R&D side. And cultural differences, I think this is so various what can deliver a reaction to something, what needs to be considered.
Thank you, Karim. So let's just dwell on the topic of unpopular decisions and communicate and leading under difficult circumstances, because I don't know if any of you saw my newsletter from the Elemed page on LinkedIn, but job flow is up, right? So we're seeing actually an improvement, but I would say Q2 and Q3 for a lot of companies were relatively tough, and there's been financial budget cuts, and there's been hiring freezes, and there's been project cuts and layoffs, and how do you manage in an uncertain, financially constrained environment, but still keep people motivated? I'm going to throw that to Stefan.
That's a tough one.
I know.
What worked for me is to be transparent in the decisions. I think that's very important, that all the people around you understand how a decision is made, and openly share all the inputs, all the decision factors. Try to get as many information from the other stakeholders as possible and involve them in those decisions. So we do, for example, have so-called alert meetings when we have an issue in the field, for example. So we have a very clear checklist that we go through. It's always the same questions about risk and frequency and all these kind of things. So it's very transparent. And each of the team members will also most of the time get a task and say, until the end of the week, you find out what the customer was actually doing with this product or something like that. So involve all the people and then make the decision process as transparent as you can. And then it's not a personal negative message, it's more an objective decision that you communicate at the end if it's negative.
Thank you for that. And Monica, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think Stefan covered, the main points of transparency and honesty. I also say don't be secretive, don't be coy. I've worked for managers before where there's a secret, right? We know something's going to be announced, and they're like, really lurking. It's like they're skulking around, like they know something you don't. So don't do that. Just acknowledge the elephant in the room. I usually tell my team, we've heard the change is coming. I will share with you whatever I can share with you when I know it. I try to be very, very upfront with them. We're all humans, right? I don't care what your title is. We all feel uncertainty. We all wonder what's going to come next. So just be the person who is direct, try and be as comforting as you can, but also don't make promises you can't keep. That's one thing I always tell people who are early managers, because never ever tell somebody, for example, don't worry, if there are layoffs, I'll save your job. Never say that because it's just not possible, right? So don't go to that extent, but do say, I will do everything in my power to keep this team as stable as possible. And I am here for you if you have any questions or any concerns.
Thank you. So very and very framing is important, because exactly as you said, you don't want to make a promise that you can't keep. So guys, that's been really interesting. But now it's time, drum roll, for the live questions. So I'm going to just share my screen one more time to everybody who's watching us on Zoom or on LinkedIn. Welcome. We hope you're enjoying the discussion. Please scan this magical QR code, and by doing so, it's going to open a Q&A section on an app called Slido, and in there you're going to be able to upvote questions and ask your own questions. And we are going to now go as fast as possible through as many of these questions, because there are quite a few, and try to have our amazing panelists answer them. So that's your last chance to scan the QR code before I take it off the screen. If you're in a Zoom chat, there's also a link that's been put in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I am going to invite the panelists. So I'm going to read out the question. If you're listening in Zoom, the question will also be copy pasted and dropped into the messages of Zoom. if you're listening on LinkedIn, look at the Slido so you can see what question I'm going to be reading out. And then I will invite you panelists to raise your either virtual or physical hand if you can't figure out where the virtual button is. And I will hand the words over to you to answer the question. So the most popular question we have is by Anonymous. And it says, what do you do when it feels you and your C-suite just don't trust each other? What do you do when it feels you and your C-suite just don't trust each other? Elizabeth. Oh, she's on mute. Oh.
You're gonna have to work on that. So if there's a lack of trust, is it because you've been going too often to talk about things and complaining, and they just feel like you don't really know what you're talking about? You're just going in and complaining. Are you being effective in your messaging? Like, is it down to you? Is the problem with you? If the problem is not with you, maybe you're in the wrong company, because if you have a C-suite that's just not taking compliance seriously and what you're telling them to do seriously, then maybe it's not a good fit. So is the problem you or is the problem them? But you have to be really, really honest with yourself as to, is it because I'm not actually developing this relationship? Am I not being clear on what we need to do? And am I crying wolf or complaining every time I go there so they feel I'm an incompetent person? Or are they genuinely not interested in compliance issues? And then you should really get the hell out of Dodge, because that's not a good place to be, right?
Does anyone have anything to add to that? Thank you, Elizabeth.
Sure.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So Karim and Monica, you've been called out. And the question is, my question to Karim and Monica, how can AI-driven regulatory digitization enhance MDR compliance by 2027, optimizing processes, time, and resource allocation? I'm going to read it one more time.
Could I start?
Yeah, go on then, Karim. Yeah.
So I think it's in the moment, and actually this is also what we are discussing, the leverage between, so what do we have really added value if we now bring resources on digitalization that we can more smoothly, let's say, get through the MDR transition? Or is it somehow concurring resources? Or should we, let's say, do in the old world, in the, let's say, PDF and manual Microsoft Office way, the technical files, just to get it done with a lot of resources? I think this needs to be leveraged, because especially with strategic initiatives, you got the value of strategic initiatives you can measure maybe in, I don't know, 3 to 5 years if it's implemented. So MDR is now postponed very often. So I think if you are not starting with it already, it's maybe hard now to start now with a digitalization strategy for the next 4 years.
Monica, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say I absolutely agree that you shouldn't jump into AI digitalization if you're already going down the path of standard, EU MDR work. AI has tremendous promise for regulatory and the regulatory work that we do, but we're still working through a lot of the glitches and the bugs, and AI right now is extraordinarily expensive. So I know there will be value. I see the value, and I anticipate using AI in, at some point in the future for a variety of regulatory activities, but I wouldn't rush to use it just because it's available. I wouldn't convert anything that I'm already doing to AI. AI is very sexy right now, and I get that, but it also comes with a couple of downsides. So yeah, I completely agree. Let's not rush into it. I'm not sure that you would actually buy any value if you tried to convert in the middle of your project.
Thank you. So we've got a question that's being upvoted and upvoted and upvoted, and that is a really interesting one, actually. So what was your biggest leadership fail, and what have you learned from it? So I'd be interested to hear from everybody on this one. So nobody can escape this question. I want to know, what is your biggest leadership fail and what have you learned from it? So Stefan, you've been quiet for a while, so I'm gonna start with you.
I'm thinking of a clever answer to that, but I'm gonna get it. No, honestly, I think that there are many fails, and it's important to, as usual, to get up after the fail and learn from it. I think what I should have started earlier is really looking into leadership and management of teams and taking care of teams. And you know, Elena, about mentoring and coaching and all these things that I'm trying to do now, because I think that's so important. It's the higher you get in the hierarchy, the more it's about people and the more it's about just ensuring your team can work as good as possible. It's you will not be the expert. You have the team that is the experts on all the topics, but you need to make sure that they have the chance to work as efficient and effective as possible.
Yeah. I totally echo your point, because I see that, you know, the more senior the roles become, the more they become about how you communicate, how you lead, rather than just what you know. And so it can never, and that's why everybody who's listening to this is 100% doing the right thing, because here you have, you know, some amazing leaders doing the job, sharing all their learnings and experiences, because it's regulatory often is very technical focused and very much focused about subject matter knowledge, which it is. But as you start to navigate your career and start to rise in your career into more leadership type roles, it has to be about those soft skills as well. They are so important. Karim, so biggest leadership fail and learning, what would you say?
I just thinking about what was the biggest. I think there were so many fails where I did mistakes. But in general, I think for me a failure is something. So for me, it's more we are doing things right for the first time, or we are learning somehow, and this is, I think, important. And sometimes when I'm reflecting myself, I think the biggest fail I would do is if I do the same thing again and again. Fail. There are things what you cannot immediately do better in the second time, but if you reflect a longer time, sometimes where I would say the biggest fail is if I do after 5 times, 6 times the same failure again and again. But this needs time for reflection, and sometimes maybe the time to self-reflect or also to get in feedback from others. Maybe this is something I could do more better.
Yeah, these so on the topic of feedback, that was something that was discussed in the last Future Leaders episode that we did, which was all about looking inwards. And one suggestion that came out was the importance of seeking for feedback, and the 360 surveys were recommended as a really powerful tool, because you're then able to get feedback from various different perspectives, from you know, downwards, upwards, and horizontally, and that allows you to see really how you're doing and to take action on that. So if you didn't listen to the last episode of Future Leaders, we will make it available. We'll link to it underneath this this recording, so that you can watch all 3 episodes if you want to. But I'm going to move now to Elizabeth, because I think she thought she escaped this question, but nobody escapes this question. So Elizabeth, let's hear from you.
Well, you know, we all get to publicly state that we continue to make mistakes and we continue to fail all the time, and we have to pick like our worst one. Because that's the key thing, is to be open to fail and to put yourself out there. In regulatory, you're putting yourself out there all the time, which is good and exciting. That's why we are regulatory nerds. We do kind of secretly like that, and we do have our inner regulatory freaks. That's why we're here. But I think the one thing that I would have liked to have learned sooner was that not everybody kind of sees it the same way as me. And I would be obsessing about the outcome of something and why did it go that way? And actually, it was only on reflection I realized that they don't see it the same way as I do, or, you know, they're able to say what they need to say and they don't take it personally, or they can somehow compartmentalize. And I think that comes with time and experience, that you can kind of say, okay, I put my best argument out there. I tried to go for this approach, it didn't work, and kind of move on. And it took a long time to kind of, be comfortable with that, and also understand that not everybody can see things the way you see, and it can be frustrating sometimes, and you can keep on hitting your head against a wall, and sometimes you don't need to.
Yeah, it makes me think about that. How long ago was that now, where there was a dress and then there was this big debate whether the dress was gold or the dress was blue? Do you remember? And everybody, was it blue? And then everybody was looking at the same picture, but you literally did see it one way or a different way. And you'd be sitting next to somebody who would, be looking at the same picture and saying, like, this dress is blue, and you'd be like, no, it's gold. So it is really, it is really a thing. Monica, what would you say?
Yeah. So I'm going to just be really upfront and give everybody a story that is embarrassing, but was completely, so invaluable to me. So when I first started out as a manager, I became a manager of the team that I had been a part of. And everybody, knows how difficult that can be, right? Your mates now become your direct reports, and that's challenging enough. And I had not yet gotten into the headspace of where managers need to step back a little bit from the team. So and learn how to deliver messages. And I remember to this day, I was sitting in my office with my two direct reports, and we had made an error, regulatory had made an error in judgment on an ad pro piece. And I said, wow, marketing is really not happy with us right now. I was just like, marketing is not happy with us. Well, they were just shocked. One of the people started crying, another one got up and stormed out of the room, and I had no idea what I had stepped into. So I called my manager, who was in a different state, and I said, I think I just screwed up. And she said, yep, you did, because they called me. So what we have to learn when we step into management is managing the message as much as anything else, right? If your coworker says, man, we really screwed up on that one, you can be like, I know. But if your manager tells you that, it takes on a whole different spin. So from that day forward, I never made that mistake again. Always, always think about your audience, who you're talking to, what the true message is you want to convey, which is, in that case, it would have been marketing was not happy with the outcome. We probably could have come to a different conclusion. How can we do better next time? And so, yeah, that was the fail that I remember most often, and I would advise everybody not to do.
Well, I'm sure that everybody is really inspired by the story, at least, of how you've got to where you are today, actually. And everybody I think the key message here is that everybody makes mistakes, right? And we've got some amazing leaders and panelists, so thank you all so much for your time and being open and honest. But the point is that you are not a glossy magazine, right? You are not even though you are superheroes, you still have your quirks, right? And so it's about putting yourself out there and learning from your mistakes. And obviously it's the most painful ones that teach you the biggest lessons as well. And we've all been there. So thank you very much for answering that. And thank you to Anonymous, who put that question in the chat. That was a really good one. So next question, most popular question. How do I raise my profile as a department leader within the business? So my team respects me, but nobody else seems to. So this one is more about raising my profile as a department leader within the business and gaining and earning other people's respect. I know Elizabeth's going to say we're not pizza, so we can't please everyone. So Elizabeth, I'm going to put that to you.
Thanks, Lena. Well, I think the key thing is, like, what is your role and how much of a profile do you have in your normal job? And if it's like 0, then of course nobody's going to know who you are. So maybe you should look around and see, well, you need to become a subject matter expert on some topic that you're looking into, like grow your role, become an expert, be prepared. And it is down to you how you appear to others, right? So the people in your team obviously know you very well because you spend a lot of time building that relationship with them. But if you're not building those relationships outside of your department and showing people what you can do, what you do know, how you can be a support for them and how they can support you, they're not going to know who you are. So it's really purposely building a network in product management, in R&D, in manufacturing, in wherever it is that you need to have interactions with. So you can pick up the call and say, I don't understand about this. Do you know more about this? Can we grab lunch or can we grab a coffee over this to talk about it? So that's how you raise your profile. It's just being a good worker, good at your job, reaching out to other people, and yeah, deliver.
Yeah. Monica.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I feel most strongly about. And as Elizabeth said, it's all about relationships, right? If you want to raise your profile, make yourself known, volunteer to do things, build the relationships before you need them. The first thing I did when I came into my current role, I set up introductory meetings with every single one of my peers. And what did I tell them? I said, I am here to learn. I want to know what you need from me and my team. Here's what I'm about. Here's a little bit about my history, and I want to learn about yours. And building those relationships has really held me in very good stead, because not only do I have people that I can go to if I have a need or an emergency or whatever, and they can come to me, but also now I've just expanded and amplified my presence, because everyone I work with knows about me and who I am. And I can speak to them and they can speak to me when we're not in the room for each other. So I think it's really, really important. Manage those relationships and do it before you need to, because I think it's great to be great at regulatory, but you also have to be great at relationships and making sure that people see you.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And I was at the medtech conference in Anaheim where we met a couple of months ago, and Ashley McAvoy, who at the time was the chairman of all of medical devices within Johnson & Johnson, she spoke, and one piece of advice that she said that really stuck with me was, take the hard jobs. Like, take the jobs. If you want to raise your profile, take the jobs that nobody wants to touch. Take the projects that are such a mess that nobody wants to go near them, because they probably have sponsorship by people that really care about them. And if it's so bad, well, anything you do is probably an improvement and probably gets you that visibility. And I thought that was really interesting and insightful, because a lot of people would be afraid to say, and you know, hey, that's such a mess, I don't want to go near it. But actually, if you are the person going, do you know what, I'll give it a shot and I'll give it a try, whoever is finding that project is actually quite important to them will have their eyeballs on that, and whatever you do is going to be an improvement to whatever it was before. And that's a very good way to raise your profile as well. So thank you to whoever put the question in there. So we've got another question.
Anna, can I
yes,
quickly add one comment?
Yes.
And the question sounded a bit weird to me at the beginning, and I just wanted to ask, there's nothing wrong about asking those peers, those colleagues, what the issue is. So I would either do it in person, or maybe there's a 360 in the company or something like that. So just ask the question. Otherwise, you possibly run in the wrong direction, and you think you're doing the right thing, but then the outcome is what you think.
Yeah, and just calling it out and addressing it head on is always a good strategy as well. So Roman, we have a question here. So it's a big one, so let's see if we can decode it. RAQM is interdepartmental, cross-functional, giving ideal management experiences and competency. What can we do that more RAQAQMs are made CEOs in the future? So I think this question is asking, if you're working in RA quality or quality management, how can you navigate from this role into a CEO role in the future? So what skills and competencies do they need to do or have in order to then become ultimately CEO of a company? Monica?
I'll give it a shot because ironically, just last week, somebody on my team said, do you think we'll ever see a CEO come out of reg? So I think what you need to do is step outside of your business, right? Regulatory is unseen, but critical. So you have to get experience in other parts of the business. You have to be savvy about the finances. You have to be savvy about your competitors. You have to be savvy about marketing and R&D. You really need to be a well-rounded person. I don't have an answer to what will take you to being a CEO, but I know rising through the ranks, it's required that you step outside of regulatory. You have to, and I think Stefan said this earlier, you have to let your team do a lot of the regulatory work, because the higher you go, the more senior the interactions that you have and the more business focused you have to be so that you can have those business conversations. So I would say for somebody in anything, right? I know we see a lot of CEOs come out of marketing, come out of R&D, but I really do believe we could see a regulatory CEO at some point, but it traditionally hasn't been a function that has groomed their people to have those CEO abilities and the visibility early enough in their career. So definitely reach out, learn other things. Don't just get stuck in regulatory. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I would echo that, because I have seen it. And the people that are successful in getting to that role are the people that have not just only done regulatory or quality their whole career. They're the people that have, moved into operations. Operations typically gives you a strong push up, I would say, from what I've seen, and also marketing and sales, right? Like really understanding those key areas is critical when ultimately you're in that role that oversees, such a broad spectrum. You have to have that variety of experience. And so to do that, you've got to look. And then the next question becomes, okay, well, how do I get that experience? And this is a question people ask me a lot, right? So I want to go here doing this thing that I've never done before. So can you help me move to a company where I can do something that I've never done before? And my answer is always seek those opportunities internally. You're going to have a much better chance moving, regulatory to quality or quality to ops. Like you're going to have a much better, or even moving country. That's going to be easier for you internally. When you're in a company, you've got a network, you're proven, you understand the products, you understand how the company works. The only thing you haven't done is the job. Whereas if you're applying externally to a company, you don't know the company, you don't know the systems, you don't know the products, you don't know the people, you don't have a network, and you don't know the role, they're going to be a lot less likely to hire you to do that. So always, if you're looking for those bridging opportunities, seek internally first, get that experience internally first, and then you can make the move externally, maybe to a more senior role of that thing that you've done already internally in your company. Okay, so guys, let's keep going. We've got some more questions. So we've already addressed the one around demotivated colleagues. So I'm going to go to the question, which is, what did you want to do differently as a manager than your previous superiors? Who wants that one? Hands up. Okay, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I keep on forgetting how to get my hand up. So I think the one thing is that you're always learning, and you should always be really always learning on your job. And whenever you have a manager, you can see that there's limitations in how they see you. I did have that feeling where they wouldn't necessarily see what I need in the moment, or they weren't able to give me what I needed, and the one learning I got from that is like, well, I just have to do it myself, and I just have to grow my own job, and I have to advocate for myself, which is important. But with the team, I'd like to consider myself trying to be aware of what they need and allowing them to ask for things that I may not see that they need, to have an open conversation and to have regular meetings with the direct reports, and for them to have in their teams regular meetings to discuss like what should I be growing, what should be my stretch goal, what should be my area of focus beyond the things that we're doing. So kind of having more human conversations and actually seeing you really in the exchanges from a managerial point of view. So it's not just tick, tick, tick the to-do list, tick, 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 but actually look at them as a person and say, okay, where do you want to go? What do you want to focus on? How do you want to grow? Are you happy where you are? How are you doing? So that was one thing I realized there was a bit more kind of a human focus I wanted to bring in.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to go to another question now, and it's somewhere I'm because some of these questions we've sort of already answered in the initial discussion, and if some of you have joined us later on, this recording is going to be made available. You can replay it as many times as you want, and you can catch up on questions such as how to motivate colleagues, what makes C-suite tick, how do you get buy-in from the C-suite, what mistakes have people made, and what should they do. So we've addressed questions like that already. But one that we haven't spoken about that I think is important, especially in today's world, is how do you make sure your team works together and bonds with each other in a remote working environment? I'm going to say it one more time. So how do you make sure your team works together and bonds with each other in a remote work environment? So who can take that one? Who's got a team across different geographies? Okay, Monica.
Yeah, my team is almost all remote. And so what we do is we gather together at least once a week to talk on Zoom or on Teams. And we also keep an open Teams channel that's dedicated just to the regulatory team. And people can drop in, you know, achievements or questions or challenges. And I just make sure that we keep an open line whenever, you know, there are conversations that need to be had or anything like that. So but you have to be intentional about it, and you have to bring the team along. Don't tell the team you're all remote and this is how we're going to do it. Ask the team, we're remote. How would you like to stay together? How would you like to keep connected? And that's how we landed on touching base once a week. I thought it would be too much. I was like, I don't know, that's a lot of meetings, but it's worked out really well because people can just drop in, say, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? Does anybody know how I can do this, you know, MDR thing that I'm working on? So you have to be intentional about it, but you also have to ask your team how they want it to happen.
Yeah, really good point. Put it back to them. Karim, what about you? Because you said that you've got remote teams as well.
Yeah, same here. So we have also a lot of people, I don't know the percentage, but most of the teams are working remote. And as I think what is always a challenge is the human interaction in the meantime. So what we are doing is making some events where all people coming in, bringing them also, again, what we discussed, preparing them. So it's not, let's say, when you, for example, want to have an open door policy, it's very hard to use MS Teams or something for an open door policy, because I think there is much more restriction or hesitance to call someone in. But I think this is some education or what we need to do, or what we are trying now to achieve. We have also, for everyone who is working remote, onboarding days where we bring people in. Also, I think one thing is more easy, that someone who works in the team goes now remote. That is maybe the more easier one, but also onboarding persons who never have seen the company before. This is, I think, more the tough one. And yeah, we planned them. I think since COVID, we had a lot of challenges, but also a lot of success due to remote work, because I think especially in Tuttlingen, all the experts are not always willing to move to Tuttlingen. So now with the remote work, I think we made also a lot of success. And yeah, I think some teaming events, I think this is very important. Also, for example, we plan events locally in Hamburg with everyone where I'm based in the moment, so that everyone who is locally here, that we meet together, building local spots. This is something also in the US. We have a small team on the East Coast, bigger team on the West Coast. The East Coast team is meeting sometimes together. So bringing people together, I think this is very important.
Yeah, and a lot of companies, they did really, really well over COVID, because COVID sort of like catalyzed that kind of remote working, and also how do you create cohesion when there is literally no office and literally everyone is working from home. And there was quite a lot of learnings that came out of that. And what I've seen is that some companies have continued with that, right? And they've taken those learnings and they've gone, right, we're going to become a remote first culture, and we're going to, create spaces for people to interact, and we're going to force those coffee machine conversations because everybody's remote. And so we're going to actually put people together and make that conversation happen. Other companies, they did well during COVID, and for some reason or another, they've sort of like reverted back to where they used to be. And what I'm seeing in terms of what people do want the flexibility, but they don't want to lose connection with the teams in their company. So it's the job of the leaders to make sure that they're still creating that cohesion, because ultimately that feeds retention and that feeds results. So I have one more question that I want to put to you, and it's the question just directly underneath this one. And it's just moved. Hold on a second. Right. When it comes to defending colleagues outside your department to the detriment of your own subordinates, which attitude should you adopt? When it comes to defending colleagues outside your department to the detriment of your own subordinates, which attitude to adopt? So that's that concept of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, Elizabeth.
I love this, because there are opportunities sometimes where the team will come in and say, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. They screwed up. They're awful. They're terrible. And you always can see it a bit less emotional when somebody's really in the moment and they feel let down by a partner in the business. And you can really also understand why it happened. And then it's to talk about the mechanics of it. Like, it's not personal. It is something happened. It's a fact. And it's really, really going against that notion of the silos, that we're in silos and we're not working towards a common good, that we screwed up, I screw up, you screw up, and they screwed up. And then it's kind of like, these are the facts. So we can either sit here and say, that's a crappy person, never going to work with them. The fact is, you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to get out of this crisis together. And actually, it's not so much defending, it's just kind of de-escalating and looking at it quite emotionlessly and say, this is the situation. It is what it is. And now we have to move forward. I understand your pain. I understand you're upset about it. It is awful, but let's move on.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else, because I know that was a question that we didn't address in the pre-discussion, any other recommendations on how to deal with unhappy stakeholders? Stefan?
Yeah, I think Elizabeth said a lot of things that are absolutely true, but there are still a few characters, I would say, that you need to handle differently, right? So at some point you need to have a very clear feedback and also a one-to-one face-to-face discussion about certain things and be very clear in the messaging. And this is also important that especially a manager or leader steps into this and try to prevent damage from all sides. Not that you burn the bridges and you can no longer work together, but I think a clear message and a clear feedback is also important at some point.
So thank you all very much for sharing your insights. So that's the end of the live Q&A session. Thank you everybody who interacted with us on Slido, who listened in, who upvoted. We hope that you got your questions answered by our amazing panelists. So now we're just gonna dip in, and I would love to get some feedback from all of our listeners. So if you could go into your Slido, click polls, and you should see a question popping up. And the question is, I'm going to share my screen as well. The question is, please share with us, and our panelists are also looking, right? So they want to know as well, what did you learn from listening to this conversation over the last 90 minutes? What have your takeaways been? Please write them on your Slido, write them in the poll section, hit send so we can see what some of these key learnings have been. And we can share as well some feedback with our panelists on what your takeaways have been from all these magical insights that they have shared with us. So I'm going to write mine as well. So my learning, there was quite a lot actually. So what we can see in here, so we are still learning. Manage the message. Key takeaway for someone. That's an important one actually. Manage the message. Be open to fail. Soft skills, communication. Yep, definitely. Really important when it comes to leadership. Common sense. Yep. The thing about common sense is that it's not so common, right? As I say, speak the language of management. Yeah. Problem solving. Everyone makes mistakes. Really good. Keep professional. Really good, guys. So thank you everybody for sharing. So there's obviously a lot of takeaways in here. The next poll that's coming to you, because as you know, this was a 3-part series, everybody, right? So this is officially the last episode of a 3-part series. So I would like to know, would you like to see more future leader sessions next year? Please write yes or no. I'm interested to see what you're going to say. So I can only see yes on the screen right now. So lots of yeses. Yes with love heart eyes. I really like that. I really like that. Oh, yes, please, with a smiley face. Guys, I'm loving the emojis. You know me. I love a bit of emoji love. Brilliant. Okay, so the feedback is looking really, really positive, guys. So I'm very pleased to let you know that the recording is going to be available. And if you are not a member or not participating in any of these things, I want to let you know that Elemed is not just about jobs, right? I really believe in adding value to people's careers, not just once every 5 years when they're looking for a job, but consistently. And how do we do that? Well, we do that through initiatives like this, our Future Leader Series. We've got our Career Diaries by Elemed executive podcast. If you haven't listened to that, please do. There's some really good people on there and there's loads of insights. So this can continue your journey on leadership. Have a listen to Career Diaries by Elemed. We've got the mentoring program that we have in partnership with RAP. So if you're somebody that wants for 2024 to get a mentor and to take that next step, please have a look on our website and find out a little bit more about that and reach out to us and we can share with you more about how the mentoring program works. And of course, we've got Elemed's RQC Network, which is, you know, the place where professionals connect to talk about ideas, feedback, initiatives, all related to regulatory and quality, not just jobs. But of course, we do have our jobs page. So if you are thinking about a challenge in 2024, do go to Elemed, go to the vacancy page, have a look what we've got on there, or just spontaneously drop your CV and a member of the team will get back to you with some feedback about what we have coming up in 2024. What's next? I'm really excited to let you know, guys. I preempted the yes. So we are going to continue with some more episodes of Future Leaders in 2024. The next episode is going to be in February and it's going to be all around managing and motivating others. So keep an eye on the Elemed page, keep an eye on my LinkedIn page. We're going to be announcing that and another set of amazing panelists who are going to be talking all about their experience and their advice on managing and motivating others. And I think that's the end of my slides. So I want to say thank you very much to all of our amazing panelists. Give yourselves a round of applause for 90 minutes of conversation all around leading the business around you. That's been an amazing, insightful exchange of ideas. I hope to all of you who have either listened live in the Zoom or on LinkedIn that you've got value from this. Don't forget to follow these amazing panelists. Don't forget to follow them on LinkedIn for more of their insights and to see their posts on leadership and what they're up to. Follow Elemed, follow me if you're not already doing that. And please have an amazing end to the year because I can't believe that we're almost at the end of the year. So If I don't see you before then, I will see you all in 2024. Have a great evening, rest of the day, morning, wherever you are in the world. That's it from me. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, Ella. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.